those of you that are observant have probably realised right now that I am not in my usual scenario inside the study. Instead, I'm next to Giza in Iceland, and that's because we're here today to test out the Mavic Mini. Welcome back to another episode of Stu's Reviews. The Mavic Mini is possibly one of the most important drones that DJI have ever made. But before I tell you exactly why that is, let's take a look at some footage that I've shot here in Iceland to give you an idea on what the cinematics look like. Here it is. So that is Iceland. I really hope you enjoyed the film. Every single shot was done on the Mavic Mini and no post-processing was done to the picture, so everything is straight from the camera. So that gives you a good idea about the overall quality of the picture, and we'll go into that in a few more details very, very shortly. But before we do, now that I'm back in the boring UK, let's take a look at the specs of this thing. I use drones in my reviews quite a lot. DJI's newest drone weighs in at just 249 grams and is currently the lightest drone they offer, but it's a powerhouse. Despite being nearly twice the size of the Spark, it weighs 50 grams less and can fly up to 30 minutes on a single charge and as fast as 29 miles per hour for a total transmission distance of around 2.5 miles. The 3-axis gimbal makes footage super smooth, which can be shot at a maximum resolution of 2.7K at 30 frames a second and 1080p at 60 frames a second. The folding propeller arms means it can fold down super small, and the downward sensors make for a safe landing. Despite its weight, on paper, this drone absolutely packs a punch. Let's talk about why this is the most important drone that DJI have ever made. It's not because it is the most powerful drone ever, which it's not, because we've already seen that in the specs. I mean, the maximum shooting resolution is 2.7K, so it's not that incredible. But what it is 249 grams. This is so crucial because it falls below different regulations that different countries have set for things like drone registration. Now this is very, very apparent in the UK, where very recently the CAA have announced a brand new bloody registration thing, which is basically a money grab because you have to pay £9 a year now to register your drone in the UK. Now for all those who are complaining right now that I'm saying against drone registration, I completely support drone registration. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do and hopefully will combat idiots flying their drone in stupid ways. But what I do disagree with is paying £9 a year for the privilege of registering my drone. That is a big no-no for me, and this is a really good way of getting around that regulation here in the UK. Now, I don't know what sort of regulations you have around the world in different states in America. I'm sure it's very, very different for everybody, but I know for a fact that 249 grams for a drone is very, very light and does indeed fall below many regulations that different countries have set. So what I would advise is if you are thinking about buying a drone, whether that's this, the Mavic Mini, or something else, double check your country's regulations before you do, because that could be a huge deciding factor in whether or not you're going to buy the Mini or something else. Being 249 grams doesn't come without its complications. When I was in Iceland, I was getting quite a lot of wind warnings, and just taking it up, I'd say around 50 meters high, I was getting a lot of wind trouble. It wasn't so much so that I've lost the drone or the drone crashed or just couldn't handle it, but I was getting wind warnings flashing up in the app every now and again. So the fact it's really, really light can have a negative effect if you're planning on using this in really windy scenarios. So bear that in mind as well. Size-wise, it's very, very, very similar to the Mavic Air. It might be a tiny bit smaller, but to be honest, it's so minimal, you're not really going to see a difference. It's obviously the weight there has changed quite significantly. Because of the new design and because it's a lot smaller, one consideration you've got to have is when you're taking off. Now, if you look at this, the rear propellers are really, really quite close to the ground. So if you place it near, let's say, a very, very small rock, even that could damage your rear propellers on takeoff. So it's a consideration you've got to make that when taking off, you need to find perfectly flat ground with the Mavic Mini, which isn't always ideal, but again, it's one of those considerations you'll need to make. There isn't really much to criticise about the Mavic Mini's size and weight because it's really, really small, really, really light, and it does a very, very good job of being minimal when you are packing it. My criticism is the size of the controller. They haven't changed that really from the Mavic Air. If anything, they've made the controller slightly worse because some of the little design changes haven't really done very much for it. I guess one of my biggest gripes was the thumbstick, and although this might seem like I'm being nitpicky, there was a huge difference between this and the Mavic Air. Although they act the same and you screw them into the controller when you want to use them, the Mavic Mini only screws in maybe 1.5 turns. This had a big impact when trying to actually sort of use the drone and maybe leaving the thumbsticks in whilst you're travelling, because I found that with a slight knock they'd pretty much come flying straight off, whereas the Mavic Air you actually twisted in a lot more. Yes, it took longer, but it meant it was much more secure. And also there's less rubber and density about this controller, but I just don't get why this controller is the same size as the drone. It feels like there's a lot of empty space inside it, and I feel like they potentially could have made this controller a bit smaller. Don't get me wrong, for those that have never used one of these before, the controller is great, but I just don't think it's quite the same as the Mavic Air in terms of its quality. There is another thing that is a bit of a consideration you need to make. There aren't any kind of sensors on the device to stop you from hitting obstacles. So there are no front-facing sensors or rear-facing sensors. There are downward-facing sensors, which work, but that's it. And in fact, you can't turn those off, so they're always on, and that's something that's a little bit irritating if you want to fly, I don't know, quite low or through particular little angles or something like that. If you fly over something, it could just shoot up because it's noticed something underneath it. But because there are no front-facing sensors or rear-facing sensors or even side-facing sensors, it means that you are more likely to crash this thing. Now, I came very, very, very close to actually crashing it myself, and here's a quick shot of that. If you look, this cable comes out of nowhere, and thankfully it passed just above the drone, but because it has no sensors on at all, if that was at drone height, the drone would have just totaled out on that wire. Now, that wire did come from absolutely nowhere, as you can see. And I don't know if sensors would have actually solved that problem, but the point still stands. If you're flying and you accidentally go too close to something, you are going to hit it. But at the end of the day, it weighs 249 grams, so it's got to remove some of the tech of the other drones to make sure it keeps to that weight. Perhaps the best bit about the Mini's design is the fact that now you can charge it up through USB. All of the previous drones I've tried, you had to have a massive plug in one of DJI's own chargers, and it was a right mess and really, really big and cumbersome way of charging up battery. But the fact I can now charge this through micro USB means that I can plug it in between shots in things like my car, which I did whilst travelling around Iceland. So although I was only there for a few days, the drone was fully charged at all times as I drove to different places because I had it on charge in the car. And also you can use mobile phone batteries. So if you've got a portable charger, like a big battery pack, you can charge up through that. So that is incredible. And DJI, if you're watching this, thank you so much, because that was on my wish list. Honest to God, it makes a huge difference to how you're going to use this drone, because it just gives you so much more flexibility rather than having to try and find a bloody 3-pin plug outlet in the middle of nowhere to charge your drone. With the functionality, I'm going to be completely honest here. I came into this review with a kind of scoffing attitude. I wasn't that impressed with the fact that it has pretty much no control over the camera whatsoever. It has a few resolutions which you can shoot in, as I've described already, and obviously you can film in a few different frame rates, but other than that, you're pretty much stuck. There's no white balance, there's no shutter speed, there's no ISO. That's it. You get nothing. The only thing you get is to lock the auto exposure and plus and minus exposure value. That's pretty much it. And actually, in fact, one thing that was really, really annoying in the software on this is that when you're flying the drone and you lock the exposure, the auto exposure, like this, and then you choose to change the exposure value maybe by +1 or -1 to brighten it up, it automatically unlocks auto exposure, which is really frustrating. And how many times I did a shot and then it had unlocked auto exposure and ruined the shot. Oh, I can't count the amount of times I did this in Iceland. It's just one of those things that really got under my skin, because you kept on forgetting about the fact that when you changed the EV, it would unlock the auto exposure. So I'm hoping they changed that at some point. It was bloody annoying, but here's the big but. Despite the fact I had a couple of little gripes there with the control, the very minimal control that they give you, I actually found the picture to be very, very good for the fact I couldn't control it. Let's go through some other footage now and really analyse how well it did. I'm going to start with this one because this happens to be my favourite shot out of all of them. I just absolutely loved this sneaky shot. It was incredible, and the fact you've got the birds flying around, it just looks beautiful. And actually, I can't find a single piece of criticism about this shot. Now, as I said earlier, every single shot that you're watching now is not corrected. It is straight from the camera. There's no grading added on or anything like that. This is straight from the camera. And actually, let's just add a bit of correction. Now you can see it just bumps a bit of contrast up, and it's quite simple to do in post-processing, but I don't want that. Let's get rid of that. Let's talk about the picture as standard. Now with this one, it handles the shadows there on the bottom right really, really nicely. It's got the highlights at the top. You can still see the blue in the sky. The detail of the waterfall is phenomenal. On the left hand side, it's all evenly lit. There's no kind of horrible nasty lines of exposure. It's just such a good shot. And like I said, this shot was done with no control. I sent the drone up, I locked the auto exposure, pulled it back, and that is what I got. So for something with no control, it's just incredible. Let's take a look at another shot. So we've got this one here, which I guess was slightly darker. There was no sort of sun on this particular point, and it does indeed handle very, very nicely. There might be a tiny bit of noise in the darker areas, but it's very, very minimal. It's just got a really nice range right the way across the board. You've got the highlights in the sky there, you've got the darker areas where the plane is. Overall, I'm just so impressed with the way it handles picture. Now, I'm not saying that it's 100% perfect. If we take a look at, say, this one here, you can see a little bit of noise in the picture. That's because it was slightly darker. Again, you've got a lot of darkness in the picture, so the noise there isn't so good. But everything is always super sharp. Now, I shot these at 2.7K, 30 frames a second, and you can really see the level of detail in these shots. I mean, this cliff shot here On the right hand side, all the rocks look super sharp, and actually if we just go back, you can even see a little white bird flying in the distance. So the detail this thing captures and the size that it is just unbelievable. And I guess it's blown me away. Like I said, I came into this with a bit of kind of scoffing attitude, thinking that I was going to get some terrible pictures. That is not what happened, quite clearly. Unbelievable. The app that this connects to is very similar to all the other drones that DJI have, although it uses a different app. Why it uses a different app, I have no idea. I really wish they'd stop bringing out different apps for different drones. Just use the same bloody app. What is wrong with you? Anyway, despite that fact, it's actually quite a good app. It's very simplified and does take away a lot of the different options, like we were talking about, stuff like the ISO and the shutter speed and stuff like that. It's gotten rid of all that complications and it makes it much simpler for an average user, which is probably why they've brought out a different app to make it a simpler process or a simpler experience for people who are less used to flying drones and potentially don't want the amount of crazy control that the other drones offer. As you can see here, there are minimal controls on the screen right now. On the right hand side, you've got a record and stop button, alongside being able to change it from different video qualities and between photo and video. You can also select quick shots in here as well, which are basically predefined flight patterns to do a number of different things, such as fly around a particular subject. Although this particular drone does not have subject tracking in the sense that you're used to in other drones. With other drones, you can draw a line or a sort of box around the subject and it can follow it. This one can't. It can only do things like fly around a specific point, which is something that I personally missed. And in the car shot that we did driving down the road, I had to manually fly it, which was quite difficult considering I was sitting in the passenger seat at the same time as flying it, something I've not done before. Top left, we've got different settings that we can change for the drone to behave in different ways. We've got P, C and S. P is your standard mode, C is cinematic, so basically it makes it a little bit smoother to fly, and S is sport mode, so it makes it a little bit quicker to fly, which you'll find are important for different scenarios when you're flying this. But overall, I found that the C or P was very nice for getting those smooth cinematic shots. The S was useful when you want to bring it back quickly or you want to fly it down and get some really quick, fast moving shots. Or, for example, when we did a shot of the car, it was good to be able to go at the similar sort of speed that we were driving at. Bottom left, we've got very similar stats to the other drones. We've got the height and the distance that you've flown. But in the middle, you've kind of got this new compass thing, which I haven't seen before, but that shows you the sort of drone's facing direction compared to where you are. So it does make it a little bit easier to locate the drone in the sky if you do lose sight of it, which sometimes you do, although you shouldn't in the UK because that's illegal. But it is a very creamy colour and quite easy to miss and sort of lose in the sky if you look down at your phone. So that helps you locate it again in the sky really quick. On the top right, we've got the current battery level and the remaining flight time, alongside how many GPS satellites it's currently connected to. In the bottom right, this is all of the control you'll have. This is where you've got the auto exposure and the exposure value. That's it. So the app is super straightforward. Really is. All of the slimmed down features and the lack of some of the advanced features of this drone equates to a much smaller price point. The nearest competitor, which I think is the Mavic Air, sits at 750 quid. This is sitting somewhere around 360 quid, which I think is such a fair price for this drone. And as usual, I'll leave a link in the description below so you can check it out for yourselves. Before we go on to the conclusion and my final thoughts on whether or not this is a drone you should buy, I want to say a massive thanks to all my current patrons. You guys are incredible. And without you, I couldn't do Stu's reviews. So thank you very much for being a patron. And if anyone out there wants to become a patron, I'll leave a link in the description below for that. I came into this review with skepticism. I picked it up and realised I couldn't do very much with the camera control, and I had a scoffy kind of boffin attitude. You can't control the camera. Well, shut me up, because look at the picture this can take with no control. It has completely shut my mouth on that, and it has just exceeded all expectations that I had for this drone. It has been incredible. So, who is this for and who's going to benefit the most? For advanced users like me, it's still a super relevant drone because it's so good. It's small, very, very lightweight, I don't have to register it, and I can still get fantastic footage from this drone. Those that are used to more control, you might miss it. You will miss it. You will miss the advanced control that something like the Mavic Air has. But if you're like me and sometimes don't want to be messing around with white balance and ISO on a shoot, you just want to send it up and get a good shot, this does a fantastic job of doing just that. And for those that have never flown a drone before, this drone is the perfect starter drone. It is wonderful, and I cannot sing the praise of the Mavic Mini enough. I have just been blown away. Yes, okay, it's not without criticism. There are things like I've been through that have been a little bit annoying, but the sheer quality of footage you can get from this just makes all of that go away. So a round of applause for DJI with the Mavic Mini. Honest to God, is incredible. And that concludes today's review. If you found today's review helpful at all, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. I'll really appreciate it as well if you hit that notification bell. And I'll see you back for another episode of Stu's Reviews soon.